Hey, what's up guys? Sawyer here from TechieGrad. So this is the Huawei Watch, and in this video, I'm going to tell you why it's my favorite smartwatch of all time. Huawei Watch was really Huawei's entry ticket into the US market. Now we see phones like the Nexus 6P everywhere, and the Huawei Watch with the Nexus 6P is probably the most killer pair that you can get right now. When you buy the Huawei Watch, you'll immediately be very impressed with the packaging. My guess would be that the box is around $40 on its own. On the inside here it says, "Timeless design, smart within," and this statement rings very true for the entire experience of the Huawei Watch. Many people call it a watch first and a smartwatch second, and this is the first reason why. One of the other things that you'll notice when you first pick up the watch is how heavy it is. As you can see, our version here is the leather band, but there's quite a few other metal options. This option is also the cheapest, so keep that in mind during the review. Personally, I like the weight, but I guess it's just personal preference. One of the biggest problems I have with something like the Apple Watch Sport is the lightness of it. The Huawei Watch is really close in price to the Apple Watch Sport as well, but we'll get into comparison later. The watch is pretty thick though if that's a problem for you, but I really didn't notice the thickness when I was wearing it. The best part of the Huawei Watch in my opinion is the full 360-degree display. While something like the Moto 360 has a great circular display, the flat tire at the bottom just seems really annoying to me. The lack of bezel on the Huawei Watch gives off a really immersive look that I really enjoy. One place where the watch could improve in the future is on the quality and pixel density of the display. Being a watch, the screen is obviously the most important element. Though 286 ppi is good for a watch, if you look closely you can pick out individual pixels on the display. This is an issue that all smartwatch manufacturers are working on at the time, because the Huawei Watch is among the first big wave of Android Wear smartwatches. To give some perspective though, most phone screens have about 500 pixels per inch, doubling that of the Huawei Watch. In the battery department, the Huawei Watch is awesome. It has a 300 mAh battery, which is smaller than a lot of other smartwatches. However, I've gotten really great battery life in real-world usage, and that's what matters in the end. Coming from an Apple Watch, I'm used to getting the dreaded 10% battery notification at around 7 o'clock at night, but with the Huawei Watch, I've been ending the day with 50% or more. This has been impressive because I've been using the watch on an always-on display setting, which means that a monochrome version of the watch face is always showing. Going 2 days is a bit of a risk, but you can definitely pull it off if necessary. Battery life is where the thick design on the Huawei Watch pays off, and I tend to like companies sacrificing thinness for battery life, because at the end of the day, if your devices are too thin to have good battery life, then they're useless. One of the worst parts about the Huawei Watch though is the charger. It looks like your standard puck that you'd put on something like an Apple Watch, but there's pins on the charger. This means that you have to make sure that you get the pins in the right spot before it's actually charging. I made the mistake a few times of not checking if it was charging and ended up with a near dead watch in the morning. The Huawei Watch is running the latest version of Android Wear, and it works great. There's nothing really that differentiates the Huawei Watch on the software side of things from other Android Wear watches, but I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. Now let's compare the Huawei Watch to some other popular smartwatches, starting off with the Apple Watch Sport. The Apple Watch Sport is the same price as the Huawei Watch, and the Huawei Watch, I have to say, is a better value. Now that Android Wear is available on iOS devices, Apple has some competition in the smartwatch market, and Huawei is definitely taking advantage of that. The biggest bonus for me on the Huawei Watch over the Apple Watch Sport is the design. The Huawei Watch feels much more premium, being that it's made of stainless steel, versus the aluminum on the Apple Watch Sport. Like I said in the beginning, the weight of the Huawei Watch feels great. A more fair comparison to me seems like the Huawei Watch against the regular Apple Watch, but the Apple Watch Sport is almost twice as expensive. The stainless steel Apple Watch is actually even heavier than the Huawei Watch with something like the Millennium Loop, which I have on this one here. One thing I do like more on the Apple Watch though is the app drawer. The Huawei Watch drawer, which is the same on all Android Wear smartwatches, is just in a list format, whereas the Apple Watch one is much more fluid. Another competitor to the Huawei Watch is the Gear S2 from Samsung. The first thing to notice is that the Gear S2 is a little bit cheaper than the Huawei Watch, and that's reflected in the design. Where the Gear S2 tops the Huawei Watch is in the rotating bezel. It's an interesting way to interact with the UI, and I prefer it to the single button in the 2 o'clock position on the Huawei Watch. It seems like a lot of smartwatches right now have one defining feature that makes them different from the rest of the competition. For example, the Apple Watch has the digital crown, and the Gear S2 has a rotating bezel, but the Huawei Watch doesn't have something like this. So overall, the Huawei Watch is one of the most expensive Android Wear smartwatches, but it's also one of the best. Actually, it's the best. The design is killer, the display is the best on any smartwatch right now, and the battery life is solid. What more could you want? If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel for more content from TechieGrad, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.